The soft hum of the air conditioning in my office was a stark contrast to the storm of thoughts swirling in my mind. I'm Luna, a 24-year-old lawyer. My life now is a far cry from the turmoil of my childhood, a past I kept locked away even from those closest to me. The serenity of my office was shattered by the ringing of my phone. The display showed an unknown number, yet something about it felt ominously familiar. With a hesitant hand, I answered, and speaking, I said, my voice a blend of professionalism and caution, "Luna, it's your father." The voice laced with nervousness did nothing to calm my rising apprehension. A chill ran through me. It had been over a decade since I last heard that voice, a voice that once meant safety and love but had become a symbol of betrayal and pain. "Why are you calling me?" I asked, my words sharp, cutting through the silence that followed his introduction. "I'm in trouble, Luna. Financially, I need your help," he said, his voice cracking slightly. His plea, however sincere it might have been, ignited a fire of resentment within me. "My help? Now you need me after all these years?" I retorted, disbelief and anger intermingling in my tone. "Yes, I wouldn't ask if it weren't serious. I'm really in a bind," he continued, desperation creeping into his voice. "You stopped being my father a long time ago. You can't just call me now and expect me to help," I responded, my voice cold and unwavering. There was a pause on the line, a heavy silence that felt like an unbridgeable chasm. "Luna, please. I'm still your dad," he said, a feeble attempt at rekindling a bond long extinguished. The word dad felt foreign, almost jarring. "A dad? You forfeited that title when you chose her over me," I said, the years of suppressed anger and hurt finding their way into my words. "You're my daughter. I thought you thought wrong," he pleaded, but I interrupted him, cutting him off mid-sentence. "You made your choice years ago, and now I've made mine." My childhood before the age of 10 was filled with love and laughter, a testament to the wonderful life my parents and I shared in our small rented house. My mother, a beacon of joy and kindness, filled our days with warmth and our nights with stories and dreams. My father, once a playful and caring man, would spend evenings playing games with me or teaching me little things about the world. Our home was a cocoon of happiness where every day was an adventure and every night a sweet dream. But our blissful life came to an abrupt halt with my mother's untimely death. The house that once echoed with laughter and love turned into a silent mausoleum of memories. I remember walking through the rooms, each corner a stark reminder of her absence. The loss was unbearable, not just for me, but for my father too, who had lost the love of his life. However, the depth of his grief seemed to diminish quickly, much to my confusion and dismay. Within just a few months, he brought home Celeste, a woman who was to take a significant role in our lives. I recall the day he introduced her, a day that marked the end of my cherished childhood. "Luna, this is Marisa. She's going to be staying with us," my father announced one evening, his voice devoid of the warmth I was so accustomed to. I looked up at her, searching for a hint of motherly warmth or friendliness, but found none. Her presence was imposing, her gaze cold and calculating. From the very first moment, I sensed a change in the air, a shift that filled me with an unexplainable sense of dread. "Hello, Luna," Celeste said, her voice smooth yet devoid of genuine emotion. Her smile, rather than comforting, seemed to hide something sinister beneath its surface. In the days that followed, the house felt different, as if the walls themselves were recoiling from her presence. The cheerful memories of the past seemed to fade, replaced by a lingering unease that settled in every corner. I remember looking at Celeste, trying to find something redeeming or kind about her, but her every look and every gesture seemed to be laced with unspoken animosity. It was clear that she wasn't here to fill the void my mother had left, but to weave a new narrative, one in which I was an unwelcome part. As I watched her move around our home, a home that once felt safe and happy, I couldn't help but feel that her arrival was the beginning of something ominous. The way she looked at me, with eyes that seemed to hide more than they revealed, did not bode well for the future. The days following Celeste's arrival were like walking through a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. The house once filled with my mother's laughter and love now felt cold and unwelcoming. Celeste's presence cast a shadow over everything, turning even the simplest daily routines into a series of struggles. One morning, as I sat down for breakfast, I noticed my food tasted unusually salty. "Celeste, did you put too much salt in this?" I asked, my voice hesitant. "Oh, did I? It must have been a mistake. Just eat it, Luna. Don't be so picky," she replied, her tone dismissive, almost mocking. The incidents grew more frequent and spiteful. I remember finding my clothes ruined after laundry. "Celeste, my clothes are all faded. What happened?" I asked one day, holding up my once favorite dress, now discolored and unwearable. She glanced at it and shrugged nonchalantly. "Maybe the washing machine is acting up, or perhaps it's time you stop wearing such childish clothes." I felt a surge of frustration, but knew arguing would only make things worse. Feeling helpless, I turned to my father, hoping he would see through her facade. "Dad, Celeste is ruining my things. She's always mean to me," I said one evening, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and sadness. My father's reaction was far from what I'd hoped for. "Luna, you're imagining things. Celeste is doing her best to fit into our family. Stop causing trouble," he said sternly, his words cutting deep. "But Dad, it's the truth," I protested. He wouldn't listen. "That's enough, Luna. I don't want to hear any more of your accusations," he replied, his voice rising in anger. Each day became a battle, trying to navigate around Celeste's hostility and my father's indifference. The home that once felt like a sanctuary now felt like a prison. I started spending more time in my room, trying to escape the constant tension that hung in the air. Living in that house of horrors, I felt alone and misunderstood. The safety and happiness that once filled those walls were replaced by fear and anxiety. Every day, I longed for the past, for the times when my mother's smile was enough to light up the entire room, a stark contrast to the darkness that now lingered in every corner. Living with Celeste became a daily ordeal of evasion and endurance. Her hostility towards me escalated from verbal jabs to physical abuse. It started subtly, a pinch on my arm or a twist on my stomach, always in places easily concealed under my clothes. The pain was sharp, a cruel reminder of my helplessness in her presence. I developed strategies to avoid her, constantly alert to her whereabouts in the house. I would take long routes to my room or wait until she was occupied before I moved around. Despite my efforts, there were times when she caught me off guard, and those moments always resulted in some form of pain. One day, while I was quietly reading in the living room, Celeste walked in and, for no apparent reason, pinched my arm hard, her nails digging into my skin. I winced in pain but bit back any cry of protest. She looked at me with a cold, triumphant smirk before walking away. During one of Grandma's rare visits, she noticed my cautious movements and the way I flinched when Celeste's voice echoed through the house. "Luna, is everything all right at home?" Grandma asked, her voice filled with concern. I looked at her, my heart aching to tell her the truth, but fear and the desire to protect her from worry held me back. "Yes, Grandma, everything's fine, just a lot of schoolwork," I lied, offering her a forced smile. She seemed unsure but didn't press further. I felt a twinge of guilt for deceiving her, but I couldn't bear the thought of causing her any distress. That evening, as Grandma left, I saw Celeste watching from the window, her expression one of satisfaction. It was as if she relished the fact that she had control over me, that she could hurt me and get away with it. Her triumphant look was a clear message that she was the one in power, and I was just a helpless player in her twisted game. I retreated to my room, feeling trapped in a cycle of abuse and silence. The physical pain from Celeste's pinches and twists was bearable compared to the emotional turmoil I felt. School was my sanctuary, a place where I could briefly escape the misery of my home life. But even there, the shadows of my struggles at home began to seep through. My teacher, Mrs. Sinclair, a kind-hearted woman who always encouraged her students, started to notice changes in me. One day, as I was handing in my homework, she gently grabbed my wrist, her eyes drawn to the bruises on my arm. "Luna, what happened here? These look like bruises," she said, her voice laced with concern. I quickly pulled my arm back, covering the bruises with my sleeve. "It's nothing, Mrs. Sinclair. I fell while playing," I lied, avoiding her gaze. Mrs. Sinclair didn't look convinced. "Luna, if there is something wrong or if someone is hurting you, you can tell me. It's important to speak out," she urged. her eyes searching mine for the truth. I wanted to confide in her, to tell her everything about Celeste and how I lived in constant fear, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I forced a smile. "Mrs. Sinclair, I'm fine. It was just a silly accident," I said, giving her a reassuring nod. Walking home that day, Mrs. Sinclair's words echoed in my mind. I felt a mix of gratitude for her concern and a deep sense of loneliness from carrying my burdens alone. The thought of revealing the truth about my life at home was terrifying. I feared the consequences, what Celeste might do if she found out I had told someone. That night at dinner, I was quiet, lost in thought about Mrs. Sinclair's offer to help. Celeste noticed my silence. "Why so quiet tonight, Luna? Cat got your tongue?" she asked in a mocking tone. I just shook my head and continued eating, trying to make myself as small and unnoticeable as possible. After dinner, as I lay in bed, the reality of my situation felt more overwhelming than ever. Mrs. Sinclair's concern had shown me that people did care, yet the fear of what revealing the truth might bring kept me silent. I was caught between the desperation to tell someone and the fear of Celeste's retaliation, a balancing act that I navigated every day. Hey, did you love and enjoy the story? Take a moment to like and subscribe for more. The day my teacher, Mrs. Sinclair, decided to involve my father was a day filled with anxiety and dread for me. I sat in the principal's office, fidgeting nervously, my mind racing with fear about how my father would react. When he finally arrived, his face was stern, his eyes betraying a mix of irritation and embarrassment. "What's this about, Luna? Why am I being called to your school like this?" he demanded, his voice sharp. I glanced at Mrs. Sinclair, seeking a semblance of support. Swallowing hard, I tried to find my voice. "Dad, Mrs. Sinclair She saw the bruises," I stammered, feeling the weight of his gaze on me. Before I could explain further, he interrupted, his anger palpable. "Bruises? What are you talking about? Are you making up stories again?" Mrs. Sinclair stepped in, her tone firm yet calm. "Mr. Smith, I'm concerned about Luna's well-being. The bruises on her arm don't seem accidental. We need to address this." My father's face turned a shade darker with anger. "She's perfectly safe at home, Luna. Are you spreading lies about our family?" He turned towards me, his disappointment clear. The tears I had been holding back started to spill. "It's not lies, Dad. Celeste, she's been hurting me." I managed to get out, the truth finally surfacing. His reaction was one of total disbelief. "Celeste? That's ridiculous. She's been nothing but kind to you. I won't have you slandering her with these accusations." "But Dad, it's the truth," I cried out, desperate for him to believe me. He stood up abruptly. "Enough of this. Tell Mrs. Sinclair you made it all up." I obediently turned to the teacher and repeated his words. She nodded back and didn't say anything. Upon reaching home, without another word, he locked me in my room. Through the door, I could hear Celeste's voice dripping with false concern. "I told you she's just seeking attention," she said. I sat on my bed, feeling a profound sense of isolation and despair. The one person I thought I could always count on had turned his back on me. The walls of my room, which had once felt like my personal haven, now felt like the walls of a prison. I lay there thinking about everything that had happened. The pain of the physical abuse was nothing compared to the emotional torment of being disbelieved and punished by my father. It was a harsh realization that the person who was supposed to protect and love me unconditionally was now the source of my deepest pain. The days following my confinement in my room were some of the darkest I had ever experienced. Trapped and feeling utterly alone, I realized that my only hope lay in my grandmother, my father's mother. She was a kind and loving woman who had always shown me affection, but I had never dared to burden her with my troubles at home. One evening, when I was sure Celeste and my father were occupied, I mustered the courage to call my grandmother. My hands were shaking as I dialed her number. "Hello?" Her familiar, warm voice came through the phone. "Grandma, it's me, Luna," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Luna, my dear, how are you?" she asked, her tone filled with genuine care. Tears welled up in my eyes as I replied, "Grandma, I need help. Can I come and stay with you for a while?" There was a moment of silence on the other end. "What's wrong, Luna? Did something happen?" I took a deep breath, the words rushing out. "It's Celeste. She's been hurting me and Dad won't believe me. I didn't know what to do." I could hear the concern in her voice as she quickly responded, "Of course, my dear. You come right over. I'll take care of this." The next day, my grandmother arrived. She was a small woman, but her presence filled the room. She confronted my father with a strength that surprised me. "Robert, I'm taking Luna with me. She's not safe here," she declared firmly. My father, taken aback, tried to protest. "Mom, you can't just take her. She's my daughter." "Your daughter, whom you failed to protect," she countered sharply. "I won't stand by and watch her suffer." Celeste tried to intervene. "She's just a child making up stories. You can't believe her over us." Grandma turned to Celeste, her eyes steely. "I know a scared child when I see one. Luna is coming with me, and if you try to stop me, I'll take this matter to the authorities." Realizing he was defeated, my father didn't put up any further resistance. As I gathered my things, I saw Celeste's expression change from defiant to defeated. Leaving the house with my grandmother, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in months, I felt safe. The car ride to Grandma's was quiet, but her presence was comforting. Once we arrived, she turned to me and said, "You're safe now, Luna. You don't have to worry anymore." In my grandmother's house, I found the love and security that had been missing in my life. It was a haven where I could heal and regain my strength. The contrast between her nurturing home and the coldness of my father's house was stark. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I could breathe again, free from the fear and anxiety that had plagued me. Years had passed since I left my father's house to live with my grandmother. Her home had been a sanctuary, a place of healing and love. But time, as it does, moved on, and with it brought another wave of change. My beloved grandmother passed away, leaving a void that seemed impossible to fill. At the funeral, my father and Celeste showed up, their faces a mix of faint sorrow and poorly disguised eagerness. It was clear they were more interested in what they might gain from her passing than mourning her loss. After the funeral, as we gathered at my grandmother's house, Celeste wasted no time. "Well, Luna, I suppose you'll be finding a new place to live now. This house and everything in it belong to your father now," she said, her voice tinged with a barely concealed glee. My father nodded in agreement, his eyes scanning the room as if already planning what to do with the house. I couldn't help but smile, an action that seemed to confuse them. "That's where you're wrong," I said, the confidence in my voice taking them by surprise. "What do you mean?" my father asked, his expression shifting to one of confusion. I took a deep breath, savoring the moment. "Grandma left a will. She bequeathed the house and a substantial amount of money to me," I explained, watching as their expressions changed from confusion to shock. "But you're just a child. I'm your father. I should be in charge of any inheritance you receive," my father stammered, his sense of entitlement clear. Celeste chimed in, her voice shrill. "Yes, until you come of age, your father will manage your property." Their reactions were almost amusing. "You don't give a damn about me so much that you didn't even wish me a happy birthday. I turned 18 a month ago. I'm legally an adult now. I make my own decisions," I stated firmly, relishing the look of realization dawning on their faces. My father's expression turned from shock to anger, then to a sort of desperate pleading. "Luna, you can't do this. We're your family." I looked at them, memories of my childhood flooding back. "You stopped being my family a long time ago," I said, my voice steady. Celeste stepped forward, her tone now begging. "At least let us stay in the house. We have nowhere else to go. We have not extended the lease of our house." I shook my head. "This is my house now. You'll need to find somewhere else." As they left, the weight of years of pain and neglect seemed to lift off my shoulders. I stood in the house that was now mine, a house filled with memories of my grandmother's love, and felt a sense of closure. The echoes of the past my father's call stirred remained. I sat there, phone in hand, feeling a tumult of emotions, anger, betrayal, and a sense of injustice. But amid all that, there was also a sense of strength, a reminder of the resilience that had carried me through the darkest of times. Did you enjoy the story? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to leave a comment and subscribe for more content like this.
All right, everyone's presentations are done.
Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward.
Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email.
Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly.
The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk.
He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale.
Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam.
My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father.
Well, you could hardly call it being raised.
After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing.
Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account.
Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out.
I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything.
The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke.
Take care. That was our last conversation.
Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment.
Yet, my father never visited me even once.
I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education.
Listen up.
Our work can change the future of our employees.
Don't drag us down.
On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly.
There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle.
At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state.
But that was long ago.
Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose.
I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry.
I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him.
Someone was watching me with a smirk.
In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go.
You are the latter.
It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened.
Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results.
As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty.
Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey.
I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day.
Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today?
Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today.
I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work.
Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job.
Having joined the company wanting to do customer service.
I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look.
To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally,
Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance.
As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick.
If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America.
Nick began the presentations.
Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them.
The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me.
There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer.
He was likely talking about me.
I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently.
Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right.
After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking.
The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation.
Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life.
I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving.
I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer.
I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email.
Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home.
The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk.
In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale.
Nick! What's wrong?
Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick.
And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires.
Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen.
They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday.
Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips.
The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally.
President of the company, Mr. Mason himself had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles.
Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief.
Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction.
Do you know how much revenue we get from that company?
We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs.
Gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan.
If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized.
Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do.
I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you.
Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you.
Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind.
Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening.
After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason.
He was demanding, get his boss here immediately.
It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training.
What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next.
Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation.
If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York.
When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was.
As the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor.
I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room.
What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner.
No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread,
hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry.
Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology.
He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike, what have you done?
Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason.
I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him.
Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand.
I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor.
Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside.
Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I I don't remember that part.
I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers.
Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone.
It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault.
This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf.
He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show.
Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation.
The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared.
Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment?
Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance.
Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too.
It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized.
As for the other requests,
Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load.
I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office.
I was amazed he still hadn't apologized.
You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company.
I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here.
When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it.
Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted.
Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent.
I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned,
I'm moving to the sales department soon.
If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse.
Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it.
On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer.
It's still working hours.
Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer.
Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived.
I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name.
They look good. What are you talking about?
These are plastic bottles.
I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea.
But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company.
It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email.
I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed.
He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important.
You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter.
Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble.
Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation.
Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment.
Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary.
Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too.
I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.